You're listening to the N2K Space Network.
And now, a word from our sponsor, SpyCloud, the cybercrime analytics leader. SpyCloud disrupts cybercrime by telling you what criminals know about your business and your customers, so you can take action to prevent ransomware, session hijacking, account takeover, and online fraud. SpyCloud constantly recaptures and analyzes new data from the criminal underground, including credentials, session cookies, and PII siphoned from malware-infected devices. With knowledge of the specific exposed data criminals have in hand from InfoStealer malware on managed and unmanaged devices, security teams can respond with a more efficient and effective process called post-infection remediation that fits seamlessly into existing incident response frameworks. Get SpyCloud's post-infection remediation guide outlining the 7 steps for preventing a malware infection from becoming a full-blown ransomware incident. Visit spycloud.com/cyberwire. That's spycloud.com/cyberwire. And we thank SpyCloud for sponsoring our show.
How fast do you think a space mission can go? From loading a payload to fueling to integration and launch, all the way to beginning operations in space. Well, how about in a matter of days, end to end? That has been the goal for the Space Force for a while now. And pretty soon, well, in the next 6 months or so, but still soon, we'll know if the U.S. Space Systems Command and its commercial space partners are able to conquer the night.
T-minus 20 seconds to LOS speed rest. Go for deploy. Roger, roll.
Today is August 31st, 2023. I'm Maria Varmazis, and this is T-minus. Firefly and Millennium are on hot standby for VICTUS NOX. Kinetic is awarded a $224 million SDA contract. Reorbit closes an oversubscribed seed funding round for $7.4 million. And our guest today is Aravind Ravichandran, the founder and CEO of Terrawatch Space. Aravind's joining us for a new recurring segment that we'll be doing on T-minus Space Daily every month, covering the Earth observation and sensing market with Aravind and his work consulting for this industry. We're calling it The Overview. And now on to today's intelligence briefing. Firefly Aerospace and Millennium Space are ready to see how they'll conquer the night with Space Systems Command. The two companies are officially in what's called the hot standby phase for a tactically responsive space mission that you might remember is called VICTUS NOX, which means conquer the night, if you love a bit of Latin. That mission is to get a payload to Vandenberg Space Force Base, fuel up the launch vehicle, and integrate the payload with the Firefly payload adapter within 60 hours of an alert from the Space Force, and then get everything ready to launch within 24 hours of an official launch notice, and then launch at the first available window. And then, once the payload's in low Earth orbit, it'll then be Millennium's job to initialize the vehicle and begin operations within 48 hours. Whew, now that is blazingly fast for a space mission and definitely a challenging timeline, to put it gently. But VICTUS NOX is a key mission for the Space Force. Lieutenant Colonel Mackenzie Birchenough, material leader for Space Safari, said this: "The U.S.'s ability to rapidly respond to on-orbit needs is critical to our national defense, particularly in today's evolving space environment. The accelerated build time the team demonstrated for VICTUS NOX, combined with demanding launch and on-orbit goals, exemplifies our strong commitment to preserving our nation's dominance and ability to freely operate in the space domain." Now, Firefly and Millennium will be in this hot standby phase for the next 6 months, and at some time in that window, the Space Force will issue the order for them to get going. And of course, Firefly and Millennium don't know when, as well. That would sort of defeat the purpose of this whole thing. But as the kids say, you don't have to get ready if you stay ready. Yesterday, we mentioned that the U.S. Space Force was working on cooperation with Japan, and today we know that cooperation will extend to a new subordinate command in the country. According to a report in the Stars and Stripes, the service is boosting its space cooperation with allied forces, including Japan, where a new component command should be standing up there shortly. And staying with Japan, the country's telecommunications company KDDI has signed an agreement with SpaceX to provide satellite-to-cellular service from Starlink satellites and KDDI national wireless spectrum nationwide. The companies plan to start with SMS text services as early as next year. Kinetic's U.S. subsidiary has been awarded a 5-year contract to engineer systems and provide other professional support services for the Space Development Agency's future layered network of missile tracking satellites in low Earth orbit. The contract is valued at $224 million. SDA officially awarded the firm fixed-price contract to Avantis Federal, which was acquired by Kinetic last year. The SDA contract covers engineering and technical analysis, management and professional services, and acquisition support to the Proliferated Warfighter Space Architecture project. The agency received 2 bids for the competitive acquisition effort and will obligate $13 million in fiscal 2023 operations and maintenance and research, development, test, and evaluation funds. NASA, on behalf of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, has awarded 4 contracts to conduct NOAA's Sounder for Microwave-Based Applications, known as SMBA, Phase A study. Among those awarded is Spire Global, who will receive $4.6 million for the 12-month contract. The firm fixed-price contracts allow for a definition study and design development as part of SMBA's formulation activities. NOAA's Near-Earth Orbit Network Program, also known as NEON, is responsible for SMBA instruments, the next generation of low Earth orbit microwave sounders. They provide critical data on the physical properties of Earth's atmosphere, such as temperature and moisture, which heavily influence weather patterns. They also enable the NOAA National Weather Service's numerical weather models to forecast weather 3 days in the future and beyond. SMBA will fly on NOAA's NEON program series of low Earth orbit satellites, with the first launch planned in 2030. Helsinki-based Reorbit has completed an oversubscribed seed funding round for $7.4 million. Reorbit enables real-time data flow in space and provides Earth observation and SATCOM operators with flight software, satellite platforms, and complete systems. Reorbit enables real-time data flow in space and provides Earth observation and SATCOM operators with flight software, satellite platforms, and complete systems. Thanks to its highly flexible software-first architecture, Reorbit says it can adapt its satellites to different missions and support any payloads with powerful flight capabilities while keeping cost and time to orbit low. Reorbit has been profitable since it was founded, gaining strong traction with customers ranging from governmental and institutional sectors to commercial satellite operators. Swedish satellite communications company AAC Clyde Space has reported a 53% jump in net profit in its interim annual report compared to the same period in 2022. The company reported a net profit of over $13 million. AAC Clyde Space specializes in small satellite technologies and services that enable businesses, governments, and educational organizations to access high-quality, timely data from space. The company was part of the team developing the SWI instrument on board the European Space Agency's Jupiter mission, also known as JUICE. Polaris spaceplane is celebrating the successful maiden flight of its Mira Light. The vehicle is a scaled-down version of their Mira plane and measures 2.5 meters in length. The German aerospace startup Polaris Spaceplane is developing a reusable space launch and hypersonic transport system that operates like an aircraft. The primary objective of Mira Light was to test and fine-tune the flight control systems for Mira. The vehicle was designed and built in parallel with Mira within a matter of weeks. The Mira Light completed 5 flights in 1 day, and the company's aiming to conduct a further 10 to 15 additional flights in the coming weeks to conclude their testing program. The full-scale Mira is scheduled for its inaugural flight by year-end. And if you'd like to hear more about Polaris, Check out our interview with Polaris's Chief Commercial Officer, Annika Wallerman, on episode 93 of T-Minus Space Daily. 5 Belgian companies and research centers are joining forces in the Astrocardia project, and that's to study the heart on the ISS. They're aiming to study heart aging and have developed an artificial miniature heart and associated circulatory system using 3D bioprinting. This so-called heart on a chip will be sent to the International Space Station in 2025. Australian company Spiral Blue has launched the Your Code in Space initiative. The program allows anyone, including developers, researchers, and innovators from around the world, to run their custom code on Spiral Blue's SE1 Space Edge computer, which facilitates real-time AI processing on satellite imagery to find insights from space. If you're interested, you can find the link to the application and more details in our show notes. That concludes our Intel briefing for today. But you can always find links for further reading in our show notes, and we've added a story that's close to our hearts. Cybersecurity and space collide with discussions on a new Space Force component at Cyber Command. Hey T-Minus crew, if your business is looking to grow your voice in the industry, expand the reach of your thought leadership, or recruit talent, T-Minus can help. We would love to hear from you. Just send us an email at space@n2k.com or send us a note through our website so we can connect about building a program to meet your goals.
This episode is brought to you by Palo Alto Networks, the leader in cybersecurity. As AI-driven attacks increase, organizations can't afford to have network security that's stuck in the past. Discover how Palo Alto Networks can help you predict what's coming and proactively secure against it with a zero-trust, AI-powered network security platform built to secure whatever, whenever, wherever. To learn more, visit paloaltonetworks.com/network security platform.
Our guest today is Aravind Ravichandran, the founder and CEO of Terrawatch Space. This is a new recurring segment that we're doing on T-Minus Space Daily every month that covers the Earth observation and sensing market with Aravind and his work consulting for this industry. We're calling this segment The Overview. Our executive producer, Brandon Karp, spoke with Aravind and asked for him to give the audience a quick characterization of his work in this market and the type of work that Terrawatch does.
So Terrawatch kind of has two arms. One is the consulting arm, and the other is what I call the communications arm. So the consulting arm does traditional strategy consulting work, go-to-market, commercial due diligence, roadmap, adoption of Earth observation for the end users, etc. And on the communication side, I have the newsletter, in which I talk about the developments in Earth observation, but also publish the analysis and insights as reports every week.
Yeah, and it's an excellent newsletter. It's actually how we first got connected, which is the team here at N2K Space were regular readers of your newsletter, and kind of that's what was getting us up to speed on this market. And we figured it would make a lot of sense to bring you on regularly to give us the characterization, who the major players are, what the changes are in demand, commercialization, business models in this market. So let's dive right in. What are any recent trends, recent notable releases and announcements in this subsegment of the space industry?
So in the last year or so, we've seen increasing number of Earth observation satellites being launched. Each of them equipped with different sensors. Different sensors is used for different purposes. From a scientific point of view, they can do something, but then from an application standpoint, each sensor is launched for a specific purpose. The most obvious one being military reconnaissance satellites, or thermal infrared satellites that's more related to wildfire monitoring, or it can be satellites that can see through clouds, which is called the synthetic aperture radar or SAR satellites. So all of those satellites are being launched, and the launches are not just done by government agencies. A vast majority of them are actually by private companies, or what we would call new space companies that were formed in the last 5 to 10 years. So, that's been a big trend. Also, the adoption of Earth observation is happening. It's not, Earth observation as a technology has been around for 50 years. The first missions launched in the late 60s and early 70s. That's when Earth observation began. But then the most successful mainstream Earth observation app or application is the weather app that we use every day on our phones that we don't think about. But, they include 80 to 90% of data for that application comes from space. But, nobody talks about that. That's been the most mainstream application. But then in the last couple of years, we've seen increasing adoption of the imaging satellites as well.
So in relation to that most mainstream adoption where you're talking about weather data, weather apps, most recently just saw an announcement from tomorrow.io. They just announced the first data from their radar satellite to gauge precipitation from space, which is kind of putting them on the same level as JAXA, NOAA, some of these nation-state level capabilities. Could you potentially talk a little bit about the business case for a private company collecting and delivering that type of data?
Well, I'll give you the shorter version. I have a very long version on the blog on a deep dive on weather. It is a very, very complicated market because weather, as you know, is a public good. Everybody takes it for granted. Right. We see it on TV. It's one Google search away. So people just assume that, it's not a business because it's free or it's just there on your phone and you're not paying for it. So it's not a business. But then, it is a business. One, from a data standpoint, do we have more data to collect about our planet, specifically of the atmosphere, that can influence better weather forecasting around the world? Yes, there are a lot of data gaps. And if you think of it geographically, there are parts of the world, actually large parts of the world, that do not have access to good weather forecasts. Can be surprising for some, but in 2023, that's the case. And also it's the same case with oceans, right? We are sending in 2023 people into the eye of the hurricane or closer to the eye of the hurricane. Hurricane hunters aircraft is what I'm talking about. And because we have no way of collecting data, there's only one satellite that does that. And that's the NASA Global Precipitation Mission. And NASA also launched recently a couple of CubeSats called Tropics, also for that same purpose, to monitor hurricanes. And what Tomorrow.io satellites give the opportunity is now we have radars. And as I mentioned, radars, they can see through clouds, meaning you can see through hurricanes and get data about, what's happening in the core, which we can then transmit to the models to improve the weather forecast, right? So that's the first business model where there's a gap. You can monetize the data of the data gaps. And, that's where private companies like Tomorrow.io come in, Inspire as well. Another private company that has launched a different type of sensor called radio occultation sensor. And the second area where there's a lot of, commercial potential is really for enterprises and governments, right? So if you're a company, you need to start preparing for your weather risk because it is a real risk for your business. You're an airline. How many flights can you get canceled if you don't have a good weather forecast? Or, how much do you need to prepare for de-icing your planes, right? That's just one industry. And think of it in logistics and shipping, supply chain, and, the applications just are infinite. And if you look at traditional industries as well, like insurance, the insurance industry has to change now, right? So weather data is going to play a very important role, and that's where commercial companies.
So the other notable announcement I just saw was that Orbital Sidekick publicly shared the first images from its hyperspectral satellites. Could you talk a little bit about that technology and the kind of the use cases there for that business?
For sure, yeah. I think that is actually a pretty big deal because hyperspectral is one of the sensors for which there have been not many commercial satellites that have launched. Actually, I think most of them have launched in the last year or two. One is from an Indian company called Pixel. The other one was for a Canadian company called Wyvern. Maybe I'm missing out others. But then Orbital Sidekick also launched, I believe, this year or late last year. I don't remember exactly when, but they did launch, I think, 2 or 3 of their first satellites. And the big deal is hyperspectral technology allows us to, I think I'll explain it in a way that it allows us to zoom in into the properties of an object. So if we see a plant, we won't just see a plant with that image. We will see the chlorophyll content of that plant. If you just see land, we won't just see land. We will see, the soil properties. And you can just extrapolate that for every use case. And I think one of the big applications that they are focusing on is related to emissions from pipelines and, leaks as well, or flares. All of that is becoming, of course, in the current context with reporting emissions, climate change, becoming very, very important and interesting. So I think that's one of their biggest target applications.
Who would be the potential consumers of that type of data? And they were talking, at least in these initial images, about methane concentration and methane leaks, to your point, about emissions. Who do you envision as the customers for this kind of data?
Yeah, the two main customers are the energy companies, the oil and gas companies, and governments, right? So oil and gas companies, for them to know about their state of emissions so that they can try and reduce. And then governments, that's more from a regulatory standpoint for understanding, where emissions are happening, so that if you're thinking about reducing our emissions, they can then, come up with realistic estimates of how much can we really reduce in the next 10 years, and how much are they actually following, right? Like there's also the policing aspects. I don't think that is picked up just as much, but I think just from oil and gas companies, they also want to reduce, or at least most of them want to reduce, their emissions. And I think the most important thing as well with all of this is transparency, right? Like 5 years ago, we probably didn't know that there was this company, or there was something probably just around the corner if you're living in Texas, or wherever there are a lot of pipelines. You now know that there are these emissions that are happening periodically. So I think transparency is also a very big deal. I don't know how much of their data is going to be open, but then there are also other open initiatives as well for methane and carbon that are coming up, where we're going to have satellites collecting data about the emissions and released openly to the public.
What are you looking forward to in the next month?
Well, I think September is going to be, the restart month. Somehow September always ends up being the conference month. I have no idea why. A lot of conferences tend to take place in September. There's one that's happening in Paris, World Satellite Business Week, that brings a lot of the space industry together. That's going to be an interesting conference just for conversations, and also the space industry is always works in ways where they make announcements during conferences. I don't quite understand why, but so there are probably some, partnerships, contracts, whether it's, Earth observation companies buying satellites, or partnership between two Earth observation companies. I think those can be expected because that's what usually happens during this event in September. And apart from that, I guess we had launches happen throughout the year. There were 2 or 3 transport missions until now. A lot of new space companies launched, just like Orbital Sidekick. And they're going to have their first images out. A couple of them just did, right? Orbital Sidekick and Tomorrow.io. And there are quite a few companies who are going to have to, release their images, see if everything's fine. And there's also going to be, I guess, in this industry, because it's so crowded now, I think every month I'm probably going to make the same, I don't want to call it prediction, but expectation that there will be some consolidation. And we're seeing that increasingly, not just on the satellite side of things, but also downstream, right? Like an analytics company being acquired by a company. And we saw that with Planet, for instance, quite recently. Planet acquired a company from Slovenia called Synergize to go downstream and start building their digital platform. I think developments like that are inevitable in our industry, where, at least in Earth observation, where things are getting pretty crowded.
Perfect. Well, we look forward to catching up with you again in a month. Before I let you go, though, how can the audience find you and keep tabs on Terrawatch?
Sure. Follow Terrawatch or myself. Probably easy to find on LinkedIn, but my name and Terrawatch on Twitter as well. On Twitter, it's Aravind EO for Earth observation. So Twitter and LinkedIn are kind of where I'm very active, but obviously, the newsletter is kind of a passive resource if you don't want to be logged into social media all the time. You can get updated with what's happening in Earth observation, and I guess also, get some of my thoughts and analysis as well.
We'll be right back.
Now, a word from our sponsor, the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute, currently seeking qualified applicants for its innovative Master of Science in Security Informatics degree program. Study alongside world-class interdisciplinary experts and gain unparalleled educational, research, and professional experience in information security and assurance. Interested U.S. citizens should consider the National Science Foundation's CyberCore Scholarship for Service program, which covers tuition and a $6,000 annual professional development allowance, as well as providing a $37,000 additional annual stipend. Apply for the scholarship and the fall semester by March 1st. Learn more at cs.jhu.edu/MSSI.
Welcome back. And this is undoubtedly no surprise to frequent listeners of T-, but things are getting busy in low Earth orbit. Not only has SpaceX contributed to thousands of new satellite constellations in LEO over the last few years, but there are also remnants of older satellites up there that are causing space traffic management issues, and worse, space junk. As you probably know, it's a real problem. Case in point, an old Soviet satellite has been spotted in low Earth orbit at an altitude of some 870 miles above the Earth that has disintegrated, most likely caused by a collision with other debris. Astrophysicist Jonathan McDowell, also famously known as Planet 4589 on the platform formerly known as Twitter, raised the alarm on aforementioned social media. McDowell believes that he has seen 7 debris objects from either the Cosmos 2143 or Cosmos 2145 spacecraft, both of which were launched in 1991. Old satellites and used rocket parts are of great concern to researchers, namely because they're floating too high at altitudes above 500 miles to be deorbited by the natural decay of their orbits caused by the drag of Earth's atmosphere. And these objects have already been involved in several incidents. This is a worrying situation and one we hope to see resolved in the coming years. Fingers crossed. That's it for T- for the last day of August, 2023. For additional resources from today's report, check out our show notes at space.n2k.com. We're privileged that N2K and podcasts like T- are part of the daily routine of many of the most influential leaders and operators in the public and private sector, from the Fortune 500 to many of the world's preeminent intelligence and law enforcement agencies. This episode was produced by Alice Carruth. Mixing by Elliot Peltzman and Trey Hester, with original music and sound design by Elliot Peltzman. Our executive producer is Brandon Karp. Our chief intelligence officer is Eric Tillman. And I'm Maria Varmazis. Thanks for listening. We'll see you tomorrow.